The future is now. Who could have made this? What universe is this from? Oh my gosh. Mega Man. Laws of robotics? Obey them. They are ahead of their time, and E-tanks are pretty valuable. So I actually really love that BPA free logo on that like official Capcom E-tank product, because if you play the Mega Man series, a big running theme is Dr. Light wants to have a world where humans and robots live in harmony, and again obeying the laws of robotics, and they're there to help each other. There's honestly a lot of things we can learn from Mega Man that we are currently encountering in our world day by day, and I just hope as AI does advance and robotics advance, we do obey the laws of robotics and understand like a good commonwealth. And that's the thing, is like Star Trek had things that were considered science fiction and now are real. Back in the 60s they were doing Skype calls and in Next Generation they have data, and we are starting to get closer and closer to robotics, artificial intelligence that can highly replicate human-like behavior. And my kind of shtick on that is just like how you should treat Alexa or Siri or your GPS with polite kindness, definitely do that with the future robots in general. I think, and I'm not just saying that because people say, oh my gosh, Terminator, apocalyptic future soon. That's what Dr. Light wants. BPA free. Let's help the environment by just handing a robot an E-tank. I'll take my black coffee. You got an E-tank. Let's spend an hour talking about our favorite Mario Kart games. Super. But yeah, I mean, they're all good. So something that my great grandma Nyla would always say is, one of her big philosophies in life is give hand ups, not handouts. And that's stuck with me for years. That stuck with me before I even knew that was her line. My mom reminded me that was a motto of hers. But even before that, I was big on, the philosophy of teach a man to fish, right? You fish for a man, you might help them out, but the whole premise of teach a man to fish is by educating and instructing, you can help them be self-sufficient. I actually think that's a big goal of just educators in general for, I've talked about the importance of upper education with college and developing and honing critical thinking skills. But even before that, all the way back to preschool, you're learning fundamentals like counting and, letters of the alphabet, and, genuinely caring teachers, they want their students to succeed. One of the first, of these videos, these topics I talked about how when I went to the University of Missouri, one of the first things I did was email quite a few of my professors at my community college. I got my associates. I went to the university from that, and I feel like some of those teachers don't get enough. They don't hear a lot from their students, and to me, I wanted them to know that they helped me out. And I had multiple teachers reply to that, and they say, they were just saying this means so much. And Professor Preisendorf was saying this is one of the, he basically was telling me this is one of the core reasons why us teachers teach, because I was telling them about the things that I took from their classes and apply to things. And I think what to get from that is genuinely good teachers want to see other people thrive from the fundamentals that were established from their help. And the whole, give hand ups, not handouts is so important because, I all the time mention competitive fighting games, card games, just PvP in general, right? Player versus player, sports, right? And, when you, at the end of the day, you have to do your actions to win the game. There's team-based games, right? But whether it's a team or by yourself at the poker table, at the end of the day, you have to do those actions to, as you aim to win. And, that is one for one with hand ups, not handouts. And I do think, unfortunately, there are people in this world that they can grow accustomed to having people save them all the time for incompetence, because their competency was never formed as a strong framework from the get-go. One thing I value a lot, whether it was my piano teacher or my saxophone instructors, they were all great teachers, and they really invoked the fundamentals of learning scales. And I think a lot of kids, when they get into band and music, they're like, at first, like, oh, scales, duh, 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 going up and down with the notes. And I think some of them might get, quote, bored of it. But they're so important, because I remember by the time of my sophomore exam, which, at the University of Central Missouri, was if you fail this 3 times, you can't be allowed in music school there. That's how big that's how drastic that type of exam was. At the end of the day, it was me. And rather than, rather than having some panic the night before, just like what I've mentioned before with, Tiger Woods winning the green jacket, and they interviewed him the day before, and he had a little bit of performance. He had a little bit of performance worried. He was worried a little bit, but he's worried a bit because he cared, right? It's a little bit of that natural performance anxiety because you care. So you channel that into what your goal is. And when you channel that and you have fundamentals that you can always fall back on, that's big. And the sophomore exam was huge on fundamentals. A big portion of it was the teacher saying, do this scale. And you just do it. Like, they would pick 3 random scales. I can't verify how random it was, but they would say, play B minor, right? And on the saxophone, I just had to do it right there. But the night before, I shuffled a deck of all the key signatures, and I just did random scales over and over. And I was able to call upon all those fundamentals that I built from my teachers. And that's kind of the crazy part, is when I was in that practice room by myself the night before, it is that factor of, my teachers aren't going to do this for me. And that this is what they want, though. They want me to do this for myself, carve my own path, keep going in life. And, I love my grandma Nyla, and I think she had a big thing for knowing the right direction to help other people, right? You have this fine line and this firm boundary of, you give people hand ups, help them out, but at the end of the day, they have to continue progressing by themselves. At some point, it's really important for self-sufficiency. It's important to invoke forms of self-reflection, being able to apply your critical thinking skills to get back up and keep at it, readjusting what you might need to fix. And, in video games, I think the big difference here is, I mentioned Mega Man, and I remember in Mega Man 10, they introduced easy mode. But what was cool about easy mode, along with hard mode, is the game was different. And so you actually basically got new gameplay experiences by playing easy or hard mode. And I appreciate that design. I appreciate when easy and hard mode actually changes the gameplay itself, so it's like a new experience, rather than easy mode just being like, oh, you can't die. No, you could still die, right? And the joke is, easy mode in Mega Man 10 is normal mode for a lot of modern games, platformers. Mega Man, has been talked about as like the Dark Souls before Dark Souls, and I appreciate Mega Man's non-hand-holding design. And if you messed up, what are you going to do about it? Can you reflect upon why you died? And that's, I like that a lot. And when this game came out, it got some criticism, and rightfully so, but Mario 3D Land did this thing where if you died enough times, you got the white Tanuki suit, which is like basically a reward for dying, and it allowed you to beat the game easier. And unfortunately, there's a few instances like that where if you die a lot, the game will just beat it for you. I don't agree with that type of game design. That is doing like a handout. I think there's a genuine importance. It's okay if you die a lot and the game might give subtle hints. I personally, I'm fine with just like, oh man, I just hit the spikes on Cutman stage for the second time in a row. What could I change, right? I don't need the game to say, hey, you should change your jump trajectory, but if the game finds creative ways to maybe help out new players, that's fine. Rather than just saying, oh, you want to skip this level, you know? And I do think there's an importance to training people to recognize what in their power can they change about themselves, what can they improve upon. And that's another full circle about what I love about fighting games so much, is at the end of the day, you can learn all these combos and setups and matchups, but how you press buttons is going to be different from how someone else presses buttons. And when we get paired up against each other, how can I adjust to how you press buttons differently from others, right? And again, at the end of the day, I'm the one that has to do the combos and the setups and, you know, try to play to win. Regardless, I have fun playing. I think that's an important factor because I think improvement is fun. You know, not fearing failure is important. Doing your best, not fearing failure, and enjoying yourself like while you live life. I think some people just forget about that, and being able to recognize others that might be struggling with something, helping them out, and finding a way to recognize their own strengths to help them carve their own paths is a life worth living. I love Monday.